Welcome, everyone. Can you all hear me? Thanks for being here tonight. Thanks, Dora. Our final Lush and Lean, sad but true. Thank you for joining us for this awesome series that we've had here in our new location, getting ready for fall. And tonight we have another outstanding topic by another outstanding presenter. I hope everybody got an evaluation sheet, and you will note about midway down on that, we are asking for what you would prefer for Spring Lush and Lean. We are starting to organize those spring workshops, so we really do appreciate you, saying, and letting us know, responding what you would like to have presented and the education you'd like to receive. Also, when you signed in, we will not use your email address unless you checked Water Conservation Program email list or help with signing up for Utility Hawk. That's what those two columns are about. And then regarding Utility Hawk, that is our free customer portal. And I feel like you guys could probably tell us about it because I've talked to you about this a lot, right? So Utility Hawk is that free service that will alert you if you have abnormal consumption. And what we typically ask you to do is set your thresholds for 1 gallon per hour for 24 hours. Because, unless you've got a water softener running, why would you be using water 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m.? And it will send you that alert. And oftentimes, maybe you didn't know about that leaking toilet, or maybe you didn't know about that leak in your irrigation system. And then Utility Hawk gives you that alert, and you're on it, right, to save water and save your water bill. So we are currently in cool season watering restrictions, meaning no watering on Mondays. Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays are for 2, 4, 6, 8. Even numbers, right? Tuesdays, 2. And odd numbers, it's Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. And like I said, no watering on Mondays, please. Now, we do have a water waste hotline. It's 575-528-4444, and we do ask that you please contact that hotline and let us know if someone is watering their property so much that it's ponding and the water's saturated the land and it can't do it anymore. It's just going to evaporate out, or it's running down the street, or maybe someone's washing a vehicle without using a shut-off valve on their hose. All those things waste water. So if you could let us know and leave an exact address, an exact date, and an exact time when you witness this water wasting, and we can check it out and inform the owner of that property who's doing that they're wasting water, and please not do that. And, oh, yes, this is very interesting. Just a moment, please. So now that we're in the cool season and we're not irrigating so much, y'all recognize what this is? It's all found in your homes. Thank you, Adrienne. So this is the flapper that, you flush the toilet, it lifts up, and then it comes back down and seals that tank, right? And then the tank fills up the next time to be flushed. So these wear out super easy, wonderful rubber, but we have hard water, we have age and different things that can start cracking it, so it's not anymore, and then water is flowing through. And according to the Environmental Protection Agency, a running toilet can waste as much as 200 gallons per day, and up to 2/3 of an average family's total water use. A smaller, less noticeable leak caused by a faulty flapper can waste thousands of gallons of water per month. So I have something exciting for you folks tonight. I did hand these out in the spring. Does anyone recognize what these are? So I'm gonna, just a moment, please. Okay, so these are not to be given out to the neighborhood children. They're not little candies. What they are toilet leak detectors. There are 2 tablets in each little package, 1 per toilet. Now, if you have 3 or more, take another packet. But what you're going to do, it's a blue dye. You're going to put that in your tank. Like, it's just sitting there. You haven't just flushed it. It's just sitting there. It's doing its toilet thing. You're going to lift up your lid and put one tablet in the tank and then walk away. Come back in about 5 minutes. And if that bowl water is blue, there you go, baby. Now this part at most places, $5, $6, $7, maybe $8 now with inflation. So easy. You're just going to flush all that out, turn off your water supply, flush it all out, and replace that flapper. Now, if you have a little bit different model than this, you can YouTube it. There's so many good videos that will tell you how to change out that flapper. And like I had just, mentioned to you, 200 gallons of water per day, And it's silent. It's not like a dripping faucet. Sometimes if it's really bad, you are going to hear it, and turning off till it fills up that tank again. But a lot of times those toilet leaks are silent. So have fun with that. A little science experiment for all of you guys. Not necessarily science, but yeah, let's make it fun. I did want to take a moment one last time, because this is our last Lush and Lean, to tell you about our Water Saver Award. And we would love for you to commend someone that you see saving water. If that's you yourself, we would love to commend you, because we all want to conserve water, Las Cruces. And we feel like this is a great way to do it. The person being commended will receive some awesome Conserve Water Las Cruces swag. But also we'd like to, share with the community what you are doing to save water. Does that make sense? It's our Water Saver Award. And we hope you'll participate or, tell somebody else that is saving water and let them know about it. And they can show us their good photos and different things of what they're doing to conserve water. Also, we would love to have some volunteers help us with our outreach. You'd help us like Miss Avery and Miss Cassidy and Miss Gilda are helping us tonight, or maybe you'd help me at the Frost Fair and helping educate little kids about conserving water and turning off the water when you're brushing your teeth. If you would like to help us, help water conservation program as a volunteer, please see me after Dr. Floyd's presentation. Thank you for your consideration. Everybody, please silence your cell phones if you haven't already done so. And now we're getting into our presentation tonight. Thanks for listening to all our water conservation good news. We ask that you save your questions till the end of the presentation. I know on the evaluations you have been saying too little interaction, but with our mic system, we have to have everybody on microphone. So Dr. Floyd, if you do decide to take a question mid-presentation, if you'll repeat that question so everybody at home. How many do we have at home listening, Miss Rhonda, Miss Leslie?
We have 4.
Thank you. And for people at home, please use the question and answer, not the chat. Use the question and answer tab if you have a question for Dr. Floyd. And hopefully we can get all your good questions answered about Dr. Floyd's good information. And then I think I did ask you to please complete the evaluation and tell us what classes you'd like to have coming up this spring, which is what I'm already working on. So we do appreciate those recommendations. We are for a huge treat this evening. Dr. Kevin Floyd is the Botanical Curator of the Chihuahuan Desert Gardens at the UTEP Centennial Museum. The garden was established in 1999 by Wynne Anderson, a self-taught botanist who collected plants from all over the Chihuahuan Desert. Of course, you probably already know we are part of the Chihuahuan Desert, and how awesome is that? And he wanted to put together all these awesome plants that everybody can see what they look like, that we can grow them at home. So having those examples in this beautiful garden that Kevin curates. Here's what he does. Besides the day-to-day maintenance, Kevin decides where to put the newest cool plant, and he battles agave weevils, and oversees the semi-annual Flora Fest, a wonderful plant sale in April and October where you can acquire a native species for your own garden. Now, regarding that, he has a little surprise for you after his presentation, hence the raffle tickets. Dr. Floyd, and I hope this is all accurate because it was a little bit older what I took this information from Dr. Floyd. Dr. Floyd is the Pollinator Affinity Research Group Director at UTEP.
It kind of fell apart, but yeah.
Oh, sorry. Dang. And runs the Bee Biodiversity Research Group.
Before I started as curator, yeah.
Okay. That surveys 3 sites that's still going.
That stopped, yeah.
Okay, never mind. They were surveying 3 sites on the UTEP campus to study bee biodiversity. Dr. Floyd received his Ph.D. in environmental science and engineering from UTEP after researching 2 lizard species in northern Chihuahua Desert. I would love that. I love lizards. Thank you for sharing your pollinator affinity with us this evening, Dr. Floyd. Can we give him a big round of applause?
Awesome, thank you. Awesome, well, thank you all for joining in person and online. So I got into, since we were just talking a little bit about pollinator affinity, that's how I got into this field. We had somebody from, I think they were from LSU maybe 10 years ago, came to UTEP, and they were interested in studying the bees of the Chihuahuan Desert because we're one of the hot spots. The desert Southwest is actually the hot spot of bee biodiversity in North America. And that didn't really work out, but it was interesting. I sort of took that on, did the surveys that we were talking about. But then when I switched, and part of that was, one of the locations was the Chihuahuan Desert Gardens. And you can see on the picture here, 3 bees. People figure out which are the 3 bees versus the hummingbird and the butterfly. So native bees have a ton of diversity, a lot of different shapes, sizes, colors. Really cool. When you study pollinators, you have to start studying the plants, and that's what got me into the gardens. And then when John White, who a lot of you might know, retired, I was in need of a job and was able to make that work. So that's sort of the background. I'm also a big birder and wildlife lover of all sorts. And so I think as conditions change, temperatures are cooling off a little bit, we like to think about fall chores, right? Summer's so hot, you can't really get outside, it's cooling off, and you're like, all right, now I can do all that stuff that I had been putting off. So we're gonna talk a little bit about what those options are. And this is the first thing. Just don't do anything. So that's the first fall chore, is to just sit on your hands, maybe go apple picking. Great time of year to look for apples. Maybe go up to the mountains and see some lovely fall colors. This is the Guadalupe Mountains. Maybe catch a football game. So these are your fall chores related to gardening. Because there's a lot of stuff not to do. There's things that we want to do that really should not be done. So one of the things that we want to do once the leaves start to fall, you want to rake them. You want to get rid of them. You want to put them in a bag and send them to the landfill, because God forbid a leaf is on your ground for more than 5 seconds, right? We also want to cut stuff back. So there's a lot of, a plant starts to go dormant. We've been taught as gardeners for a long time that once a plant is dormant, you want to cut it back, and you want to, leave that so that it's ready and clean, right? A lot of this is about cleanliness. We want our yards to look nice. We don't want to see dead or dormant stalks. We don't want to see brown leaves. We don't want to see grasses that are dormant. We want things to be clean. But don't do that, and I'll tell you why. We'll get to that. There are some things you can do. Now is a great time to be planting. Temperatures are cooling off. We still have, I don't know how many, 6 weeks maybe before we get a freeze. It's always hard to say. El Paso is a little bit warmer than you are here, but I think last year the freeze was like late December before we got a killing freeze. And so all of that time right now, temperatures are still cool, so the plants are doing better, they aren't as stressed, the soil is still warm. It's just a really easy time to be planting. The other thing you can do is a lot of planning. So I know probably a lot of us get seed catalogs or bulb catalogs in the winter, because everything is marketed to the north. You probably have experienced this. So it's cold and snowy outside, and so you want to go through seed catalogs. here it's 60 outside, oh no, on most days. And so we can still do a lot of stuff outside, but we can also start looking at what are the plans? What do we want to do to make our yard better, make our yard more wildlife friendly as we move from the sort of winter into spring? And so this is actually where I admit that this is a fake talk. So this is a Trojan horse talk. This is really a wildlife gardening talk, sort of wrapped in this fall gardening thing, because like I said, most of what you do in fall is nothing. And so most of what we're going to talk about is how do you make a wildlife friendly garden with some of the tips about what you can be doing now and what you can be thinking about. I will also say most of these lessons, most of the tips are about landscaping type gardens. If you have veggie garden and your tomatoes die, the message isn't leave your dead tomatoes in there. Or if you have diseased plants or things like that. So, your veggie garden is different. Fruit trees are different. So things are different. The other piece with this, a lot of this sounds very black and white, like never cut anything back. Well, that's not the case, right? We want people to be moving from sort of this preview of cut everything down, rake all the leaves, towards less of that. It doesn't mean you can't do some of that, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. I was just cutting back some salvias. I transplanted one in my yard. There was dead growth on it, so we cut it back, better for transplanting, things like that, even though I'm going to tell you not to do that. So the take-home message, if you want to support wildlife, and I'll hopefully convince you, if you aren't already convinced that that's a good goal, you'll get that through the talk, but you need to provide food, you need to provide places to nest, and importantly for this time of year, for the insects and animals to overwinter, and then we also need to provide a safe environment. So we're going to talk about why garden for wildlife, and then how to do those things. How do we provide abundant food? How do we provide the places to nest and overwinter? And how do we provide that safe environment? One of the things that I think people want and I never provide are plant lists. There's no way that I can say, here are the 5 plants that you put in your yard, because I don't know your yard, I don't know your soil, I don't know the exposure. This to be said, I am going to show you some good plants to use towards the end, but at the Chihuahuan Desert Gardens, we have an acre and we have 600 species of plants. And so if I gave you a list of the plants that I like, you would get a list of 557 plants. There's probably 20 I don't like in the garden that are annoying. But other than that, most of them are pretty good. And with a sort of native plant palette, you can find something that'll work in just about every spot that you're looking for in your yard. So again, we're providing some like guiding principles, not necessarily a full plant list. I will say it's a little outdated, but on our website, so if you go to utep.edu/museum, there's a link for garden, resources, and then in the resources, there's a recommended plant list for El Paso and Las Cruces. It's a PDF of about 8 pages, something like that. The information, the plants are still great to use, but there's a column that talks about their availability in nurseries. You can ignore that because like availability is really hard these days. A lot of the plants that were available 25 years ago when the list was put together are not available anymore. Which is a whole different talk. But there is a plant list there. The other thing that you can look for, Xerces Society, which is an insect conservation org, they have a plant list for the Chihuahuan Desert, which is good to look at. So there's lists out there, and then you can take that. Again, this is your winter planning process, right? So you're sitting in January, it's a nippy 55 degrees outside, you've got your cup of coffee, and you're looking at the lists on the Xerces Society or something like that. Okay, so why do all of this? I would say that wildlife adds beauty and interest, that it promotes, gardening in general promotes the well-being of gardeners. So being out gardening reduces stress, gets fresh air, gets exercise. So the actual act of gardening increases well-being. And then I think right now, I don't remember, I think I do have some of this in here, but increasing this natural habitat can really help with biodiversity loss. And we have a lot of insects in particular that aren't doing very well. We're seeing decreases in population sizes. And so doing something in your yard to increase that natural habitat is an action we can take. It's a small action, but it's something we can all do to try to help, promote biodiversity. This picture here, this is a agapostamon, a green sweat bee on Greg's mistflower. Does anyone have Greg's mistflower in their yard? This is the time. If you don't have it, man, you are missing out. It's a plant that's maybe 2 feet tall, has these lovely purple flowers, and pollinators love it. In particular, right now, queen butterflies. So I've got a patch at my house that's maybe 2 feet across, well, probably 4 feet across now, and has 15 queen butterflies on it on a day. And you see it on campus, like all over. So a great plant to add. It was Greg's mistflower if you're trying to take notes. Okay, so talking about biodiversity, this is the sad part. We get through it quickly, and then we leave on a hopeful note of what we can do. But looking at pollinators in particular, we really don't know a lot about what's going on with pollinators. We know about honeybees because honeybees are a managed crop, essentially. They're livestock. And we know that their numbers are not doing great. So this figure here, let me see if I can get the laser. Nope, that's something else. I'm going to break things. So number of managed beehives, that's the graph that's going to be on your left, has decreased. So number of managed beehives have gone down. We've probably heard, some of us have heard about colony collapse disorder. This was big news maybe 15 to 20 years ago. And where it made news was that it was weird. It was a mystery because whole colonies, you'd have a hive, the workers would leave and they wouldn't come back. And so that was the collapse of the colony. And then people had to try to figure out why. Like you expect some bees to die. Adult foraging bees don't have a long lifespan. There may be a month or two that they're actually out foraging before they die, get eaten, something happens. But having all of them disappear at once was a surprise. And so this graph on your right shows you that excess of loss. So honeybee hives, there's a set amount of what's considered acceptable loss. These are living organisms. They are under stress. Not every hive makes it from year to year. And that's what those blue bars represent. The red on top of it is the excess mortality. That's sort of that unexplained, we're not quite sure what's going on. So honeybees have been undergoing decreases. It's been pretty stable in terms of overall number of hives. But this is really an economic issue because a beekeeper that loses a hive has to go buy another queen and sort of restart that hive. So it costs more, which is then passed on to the cost for the farmer that's bringing the hives out. So it impacts economics, but honeybees are not at risk of going extinct. So it's the same thing, like chickens are not at risk of going extinct. Cows are not at risk of going extinct. We eat them, we make more of them. Honeybees die, we make more honeybees. So it's really more economic issue, not necessarily a biodiversity issue. Let me click out of that. Here we go. There we go. Monarch butterflies, so that's the other one that we have a pretty good sense about. Largely because monarch butterflies are beautiful, they migrate through most of the US. We're in not a great spot for them. I did have one in my yard last week on the Greg's mistflower, so they do come through, but most of them, it's 15 queen butterflies to one monarch, and that one monarch was the first one I've seen at my house in a couple years. So we don't, and that's not a crash of the population, we're just sort of in the middle of their two flight zones. But we do survey them, and so the surveys in Mexico, you've probably seen the pictures, they overwinter in these high elevation pine forests, and they count basically the acres that are occupied, and that gives us an estimate of how many monarchs there are. You can see two things from this chart. First, they fluctuate a lot, so the numbers go up and down quite a bit. This is pretty common with invertebrates. Their populations can boom if conditions are good, and then they can really collapse when conditions are bad. A lot of insects can lay hundreds of eggs, and so populations can really fluctuate a lot. The other thing you'll probably notice from this is that the numbers the general trend is down, and so most people know, monarchs are not doing well. The other population overwinters on the California coast, and those populations are also down. So it's this sort of overall impact of monarchs decreasing excuse me, probably due to multiple things. Habitat loss is one of the big players. The other piece that we'll talk about in a bit, but what do monarchs need to have, what do their caterpillars need? Milkweed, right? So they're specific to milkweed. I'm getting a lot of feedback, so I'm seeing if I shift this down a little. I'm a loud talker, so I wasn't talking at my normal talking voice when he was setting everything up. Right, so milkweed, so caterpillars need milkweed. That did not help. These are off. Yeah, we can try this. I keep standing further away, and that seems to do something, but we'll try this until something goes poorly, and then we'll try something else. I can switch to that. I just, I like to potentially move. So milkweed, we've gotten really great at agriculture, and we can plow up to the, 1/10 of an inch. And so areas on the sides of fields where there used to be more wild plants, more weeds like milkweed, we've sort of wiped that out. We've just lost a lot of habitat where milkweeds were from. And so we've lost a lot of the host plants for the monarchs, which then means as they're doing their migration, this 4-step migration from Mexico up to Canada and then back down, there's just less food for them. And so there's a lot of efforts to plant milkweed. People always ask at plant sales, do we have milkweed? We have some occasionally, but again, we're not in sort of this main area, and a lot of the milkweeds that we have here are kind of extra weedy, not necessarily something they want in their yard. We are working on growing more, but so anyway, monarchs, the whole long rambly story with the microphone adjustment is that monarch butterflies aren't doing well in general. Native bees, we just don't know about most of them. They're very small, there's lots of them. Studying them is really hard. That's one of the reasons we don't do it anymore, is it was actually a lot of work for not a ton of reward. Scientifically, I will say it's a great project. Bees are adorable. But what these bar charts or these pie charts are showing you is that there's about 4,000 species of native bees in North America, and about 93% of those, we just have no idea. No one studies them. They're too small. We just have no clue what's going on with their population. Of the 7% that we know what's going on, about half are doing okay and about half are at risk of extinction. And most of those are going to be bumblebees and sort of the bigger bees that are easier to track. So not great and then not known. I mentioned I was a birder. This was a pretty shocking study that came out about 6 years ago now that found that about 1/3 of the bees, of birds, about 30% have decreased in the last 30 years. And it's about 3 billion birds since the 1970s. A lot of this is from Christmas bird counts, eBird checklists, things like that. And a lot of this isn't necessarily that the birds are going extinct, but it's that some of the common birds are becoming less common. And it's hard, people can say, oh, I do remember I used to see more, or I feel like it's the same numbers. That's why, we don't just go off of what people remember. We submit data and look at these trends, but populations have gone down quite a bit. This more difficult figure to look at breaks it down by habitat type. And the only good news on all of that are wetlands. So wetland birds have increased about 20%, and a lot of that is thanks to Ducks Unlimited, wetland conservation work, Bosque del Apache that hopefully everyone has either been to or will get a chance to visit. It's about 2 hours north of here near Socorro, New Mexico, a wildlife refuge. But wetland birds, we've learned about wetland birds in trouble, and then there were conservation orgs, largely with hunting as sort of the backbone of it, that said we really would like to still have birds to hunt. Let's protect the habitat. And it works. So that's like the great news of all this, is that when we protect the habitat and do work on the conservation, the bird populations can increase. Grasslands are the sad news of that. That's about a 50% decrease. And that's at central US. That's the breadbasket. That's where a lot of agriculture is happening. And so there's just not a lot of habitat left for those birds. So that just is the more detailed bad news, other than wetlands. And then this is just looking at other taxa in general. The two main takeaways of all of this, so mammals, birds, amphibians, reptiles, fish, and insects. Most of it we don't know about. Birds are kind of a unique case because there's a lot of dorky birders like myself who submit checklists, and so we actually have good data on birds because people are out identifying and looking at them. The other stuff we don't know as well, but most of them aren't great. So the red bar is the decreasing, so you can see that 25% or so of these different taxa are decreasing. So we know all of this is bad. There's different causes. Habitat loss is one of the big ones, climate change, pesticide. We use a lot more pesticides and herbicides than we used to. Parasites and diseases are also part of the problem. But we're going to focus just on the habitat loss, primarily, pesticides a little bit as well. And we're going to focus on how can we use our yards to help fix this problem. How do we restore habitat by changing the way that we garden? Okay, so hopefully at this point you feel excited about bugs and sad about the state of bugs. And so now we're going to make sure that we can all have more bugs in our life. So, what do pollinators need? Well, a lot of it is flowers. And flowers provide two food sources for pollinators. Nectar, which is their Coke, their Pepsi, whatever, their Red Bull, it's sugar water for them. So it's the energy source. And you'll see a lot of insects and animals visiting flowers just to get nectar. So they need the fuel to make it to the next plant. The other thing that the pollinators use is pollen. That's sort of true. Bees use pollen, other ones don't. We'll hopefully talk about that. But they're looking basically for food sources, right? So flowers are food, either nectar or pollen. And in this picture, we've got, working from left to right, a blue mason bee, which is osmia, which is the license plate on my car, because my car is about that color. And I'm a dork. And it's nectaring on a Texas mountain laurel, which hopefully is a plant you're familiar with. Beautiful blue, not hydrangea, what's the dangly? Wisteria type flowers, smell like grape soda, flower in the spring. Queen butterfly on mist flower on the bottom, a longhorn bee on a sunflower in the middle, a hummingbird, probably a rufous female. I'd have to look more carefully on hummingbird bush appropriately, or Aniseacanthus. And on the bottom, a butterfly nectaring on some lantana. So when you look at this picture, one of the things you might notice is that there's a variety of colors and shapes. So again, these guiding principles, you want to have diversity in your yard to support a diversity of insects. The Texas mountain laurel flowers early in the spring. Which one am I looking for? The Aniseacanthus flowers sort of summer through first freeze. Most sunflowers are more summer through fall. So you want to think about the time of year. You want to think about the variety of shapes. Hummingbirds are well known for having that long beak. They like tubular flowers. So if you don't have any tubular flowers, you're not going to support the hummingbirds as well. On the other hand, if you only have tubular flowers, then the bees have a harder time getting into those flowers. So diversity of colors, shapes, diversity of seasons. So this figure, so I'll walk you through it because if you haven't seen these, it can be a little confusing. It's month of year across the top, January through December, and then the bloom period for the plant. And so what this tells us is that, and this is out of Austin, so this is Central Texas, take it with grain of salt as far as the timing, but it's the basic idea here. So the Texas mountain laurel is sort of a February, March bloomer. Spiderwort is a March to May bloomer. If you come down to the bottom, Mexican hat, the Ratibida is kind of a May through August, October bloomer. But the point of this is that if you have all of these plants in your yard, and this is a list of a dozen or so plants, you have something flowering basically every month except January. And I'd say, in our area, you could probably have something flowering in your yard 12 months of the year if you are planting the plants appropriately. This is less visually appealing, which is why it comes second, but this is from the Xerxes Society. This is that guide to plants of the Chihuahuan Desert that I mentioned, pollinator plants. And it gives you sort of that same idea. It has the names, but it also has the bloom period. So May through July for Lechuguilla, which is the shindigger agave. I don't think anyone would really plant them for their flowers, but the milkweeds in there, March through October, July, and so on. And it gives you other information and details on there. So again, as you're doing your homework this winter and doing your planning, you can look at these lists and try to figure out, is there a time of year that you don't have good flowers? I think we really focus a lot on sort of summer flowers in sort of typical gardening. We don't think as much about early spring and late fall. Right now, just out in front of the street here, there is turpentine bush that was just finishing flowering. There are still some red yuccas that were flowering. There's Texas mountain laurel that isn't flowering yet, but if it's not cut back poorly, it'll have buds and will flower in the spring. The other part, so this is both observe other gardens as well as your own. So as you're trying to figure out what plants to include, come down to El Paso and come to the gardens. Go out to the Mesilla Valley Bosque. Go to the demonstration garden at the water utilities. Look out. I mean, there's a lot of really beautiful landscaping around town. Take a look at what's being visited. Some stuff, you won't see a single pollinator on it. Other things are covered with it. Some stuff does really well. If a plant can grow in the street, median, it's a pretty good plant for your yard. It's an easy one because you know that it's dealing with really tough conditions for the most part. Full sun, questionable watering. It's supposed to be watered, not all the time. Car exhaust, cars driving over them, God knows what else happens to them. But do a lot of observations. In this picture, we have the top left is actually a syrphid fly. This is a fly, not a bee. It's a mimic. Looks a lot like a bee, but it has really big eyes and short antennae, which tell you that it's a fly. And that is on a bare grass. There's a native bee, if you go clockwise, that's a native bee on Engelmann's daisy, a swallowtail butterfly on, I forget the common name for it, Havartia pallens. And then this is a cute little bee that was just hanging out on a monarda leaf, just contemplating life, cleaning its feet, things like that. Okay, so this is the part that vegetable gardeners in particular get cranky at because you have to let things eat your plants. If you want to have a wildlife garden, you need to let your plants get eaten because that's what the butterflies do. So the butterflies lay eggs on plants, the caterpillars eat those plants, they go through pupation, and they turn into these beautiful butterflies. So we have the picture on the left is a monarch butterfly caterpillar. Up on the top are tomato hornworms that turn into hummingbird moths. And then the weird alien in the middle there is a pipevine swallowtail caterpillar. So you might see that and think that it is an alien that needs to be sent back to the depths of hell. But if you do that, then you don't get this beautiful swallowtail with the purpley blue underside of the wings. So look at butterfly larval host plants. There are lists out there as well, so you can find things that are the host plants for particular species. If it is your prized tomato, feel free to kill them, but just know that when you do, you're having fewer of the caterpillars. Maybe there's another plant you can move them to. Maybe there's something that's sort of on its way out that you can let it go to. I was actually just contacted yesterday. Somebody had monarch butterfly caterpillars in their yard, and their milkweed got eaten down too much. More caterpillars than they could handle, and so do I know anybody that has milkweed they can use to feed their caterpillars? So I don't know if they'd have the same thought if it was a tomato hornworm. They might not be looking for, like, do you have some tomato plants I can use for my tomato hornworm babies? But at least monarchs, they're our gateway caterpillar, so. With birds, abundant food, there's different types: seeds, nuts, berries and fruits, nectar, flowers, spiders, other tasty inverts. The seeds and nuts is an important part, especially as we start thinking about fall chores. If you want to cut back your grasses and deadhead everything, you're basically taking food away from the goldfinches and other finches that are looking for that. A lot of sparrows, I've been noticing, are migrating back to our area. They spend the summer breeding up north. We're their winter zone. And so if they come down and all of the grasses that were beautiful got chopped down to the ground, there's no food for them. So leave those seed heads up. Let the birds eat the seeds, eat the grasses, things like that. So there's a pine siskin that's eating sunflower seeds, acorn woodpecker shoving acorns into a tree. We don't have a lot of them around. I know we've got a few in El Paso. Do we have acorn woodpeckers up here? They're more northern and mountainous than this, but they're very cool. We've seen a couple of them this year. And painted buntings, which are a summer bird for our area, but they're grassland birds. They like to eat grass seeds, so having those seeds is a good way to support these bird populations. Most bird feeders are looking at seed, so if you have a bird feeder that has like black oil sunflowers, like this house finch is eating, or a Niger seed or a black thistle seed feeder, like all these lesser goldfinches are going after, that's great. Like, knock yourself out. I mean, these are my yards, so I'm a full supporter of feeding birds with bird seed. But you can also just leave your plants up, and then there's food for those as well. We have some sunflowers in the front, and I think I see lesser goldfinches on our sunflowers more than I do on their thistle feeder. And then anytime you're feeding something like this, you have to be very careful with hygiene for the birds. Birds poop all over the place, and so if you just keep refilling the seed and you don't clean the feeders, it can be a way to spread disease. There was a recommendation last year, I believe, maybe 2 years ago, about everybody taking their feeders down because of avian influenza coming through. That's more wetland birds, but it's definitely, if there's any questions, take your feeders down. The birds are usually not dependent on this, especially if we all start planting and leaving things up, leaving the plants up. This is just, the bird feeders are more for our entertainment than they are for bird survival, because it's fun to see them and have them come in. Fruits and berries, a lot of our desert plants are fruiting right now. The ones in the picture, the spiky one with the blackberries is a condelia, and then the one on your right is hackberry with the red fruits. They're producing right now, birds are eating them right now. Fruits tend to be high in sugar, high in fats, and so it can be really important as they're migrating or to provide that energy that they need to survive when it does get cold. Also, palm trees. Jeff will be happy by this. Palm trees are a great source. We often see tanagers and all sorts of cool birds eating palm fruit or prickly pears. So if you have prickly pears, you can harvest some of the tuna for yourself, but leave some for the other birds. Texas persimmon is on the list there. I don't have a picture of it, but we have one in the garden. It's one of the few sort of native fruits that you can actually just grab one off the tree and eat it. But you can only do that if you can actually beat the birds to it, because most of the ones you grab have holes poked in them from the birds getting them. It's a good trade, though. This is less of an issue right now because most of our nectar eaters migrate south because we don't have a lot of blooms in the winter. But during the summer in particular, you can provide things like desert willow, ocotillo, salvias. There's salvias that some of you will be taking home today that will help provide food for hummingbirds in your yards. So we have black-chin hummingbirds, calliope hummingbird, different orioles go to nectar. Just about anything with tubular flowers is a great hummingbird plant. This Aniseacanthus, the one that the bird on the right is visiting, I can't recommend enough. It's native to South Texas, but it handles our temperatures and rainfall really well, spreads all over if you're lucky. But again, I have hummingbird feeders up, and I see hummingbirds at the Aniseacanthus at my house way more than I see them at the feeders. They really are going to these plants. Just to mention hummingbird feeders, so 1 part regular white table sugar to 4 parts water, heated up to dissolve the sugar. You can save the sugar water in the fridge for a while and replace it, so you can do a big batch. But the biggest thing is if you're going to put out hummingbird feeders, you have to commit to cleaning them. They can get mold, they get fermentation. Like if you open it up and it smells more like a brewery than it does like a hummingbird feeder, you know it's gone too long. So only put out what you can clean. If you're going on vacation, take them in. It's better to not have food out than it is to leave toxic food out for them. And then you can still have them out. I know I had a hummingbird at the garden a couple days ago. They're definitely mostly moving through. If you live up near the mountains, you might have them through the winter. But you can have them out. You're not affecting their migration or anything. You can provide the food until you're confident they're gone, and then you can take them in. Just like, you know, other bird feeders, hummingbird feeders are more of a us thing than a them thing. They do know that they're there. They do sort of clock it as a food source. They'll come back to the same spot on their migration, but if you have other flowers or if there's other plants around, they can also do fine with those. Insects. So you have to have insects for birds. We don't think about this. No one thinks about insect feeders, which you should, because insect feeders are native plants, and we'll talk about that. But just about everything eats insects. So we think of things like warblers and flycatchers and swallows maybe that are insectivorous birds, but even things like finches and hummingbirds do eat bugs at some point of their life. It's protein. They use it, if not necessarily in the adult phase, they're really important for feeding their young. And so we need to have insects. We need to let insects live and spiders live because the insects are bird food. So even if you don't like insects and you're icked out by insects, but you really like birds, you have to just turn the other way when you see the bugs and hope that enough birds come in to eat all of your bugs. And how do you get more bugs? You plant more native plants, and we'll talk about that. Same thing, variety is important, so you want to have a diversity of plants to support a diversity of insects, which supports a diversity of birds. Just about everything is good. Mesquites and oaks are particularly important. There's lots of different types of moths and other bugs that you can find on both of those trees. It's one of the best places to look for insectivorous birds, warblers, and things like that. So the native versus non-native. So I work at a native plant-focused garden, so my focus is on native plants. Here on the left, we have a honeybee visiting a rosemary plant. On the left, we have a bumblebee visiting a Texas rain sage. And the rosemary is not native. The honeybee is not native. The bumblebee is native. The leucophyllum, the rain sage, is native. So which is the better option? Well, a native plant, first of all, just to sort of set the stage on that, we typically consider native plants to be those that are found in the area prior to European settlement. That's kind of the typical definition of a native plant. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's pre-European because indigenous peoples move plants around as well. Climate change has shifted where plants are found, so plants have always sort of moved around. Native plants have been in an area long enough that they've evolved relationships with the other plants and the other animals around them, and these relationships help to support the ecosystem. So the plants don't want to get eaten, right? So they have toxic chemicals in them. The insects do want to eat them, so there's strong pressure for them to be able to eat the particular plant, and so there's a lot of back and forth coevolution that occurs with the native plants and the native flora or native fauna. And so that's basically what we're looking for. And so if we have, and so what's native, right? So is native, in your definition, only something found in the Mesilla Valley? Is the other side of the mountain okay? Could you go to the Sacramentos and consider that native? So there's some questions about sort of what your geographic definition of native is. But typically, the closer you can find them sort of naturally, the more native it is. And those native plants are going to be supporting the insects because the insects have evolved to eat those particular plants. You bring in something from Asia or from Europe, the insects haven't had that time to evolve the ability to eat those plants. And so it's not a food source. So the general advice is to go native as much as possible. But again, like I said at the beginning, this is not an all or nothing. This is not a black and white. There are plenty of non-native plants. Rosemary does great in our region, flowers through the winter. It's a great culinary herb. It does flower at times that native plants aren't. So they do support some other plants. But in general, work towards native. In general, work away from pavement. So that's kind of the continuum, right? Paved front yard, bad. Totally native, wildscape, good. You're somewhere in between, and that's great. So just sort of keep moving more towards the more native. But plants are better than no plants. I didn't even mention some of the other benefits, which I should, given that there's people from the water utility sitting over there. Native plants use less water, right? So that's one of the big advantages of them, is that they don't need as much water as planting stuff from the East Coast that normally gets 60 inches of rain, as opposed to a Chihuahuan Desert plant that's used to 8 to 10 inches of rain. So saves water, helps the biodiversity. They're beautiful. Like, there's really nothing to not like about native plants in general. Okay, places to nest. So if your knowledge of bees are honeybees, awesome. Honeybees are really cool, but they are like no other bee. Most bees are solitary. They don't form hives. They don't have colonies. They don't have queens. They don't make honey. They don't make wax. Like, all the stuff that we've learned about with honeybees is the weird case. Most bees are either ground nesters or wood nesters, and most of them are solitary. So most of them are not making hives. Most of them are single individuals out finding resources and laying eggs. The other part that's really important when we start thinking about our yards is that most bees don't travel very far. It's basically proportional to the size. So a small bee doesn't travel very far, a big bee travels farther. But a lot of bees, it's 500 meters, so it's your yard and your neighbor's yard, maybe your neighbor's neighbor, but that's their life, that's their universe. And so what we're doing in our yards really does make a difference for these pollinators that don't move very far. Native bees, a lot of the ground nesters, they like bare ground. They're adorable if you see them poking their little head out of the ground. They dig nests, they'll lay eggs in there. So as much as we talk about mulch as an important part of gardening, it's important for wildlife to have sections that are not mulched, where there is some bare ground that the bees can get down to. So leave some sections bare. That's for the ground nesters. For the wood nesters, the stem nesters, this is where don't cut your stuff back right now. Leave your yard messy. A lot of bees will nest in dead wood or dead twigs. And they have this interesting way of making the nest. So this picture at the bottom right is a type of osmia, a type of this mason bee. And so they find a twig or some hollow stem. They make a little mud or a little leaf barrier. They collect pollen. That's what this pollen nectar provision picture is. And that's why I mentioned bees are a little bit different. They're actively collecting pollen because that pollen is what they feed or lay their eggs on. So they make trips, they get pollen, mix it with some nectar, make a little ball called a pollen loaf. They lay their egg on it, single egg. They do a partition and they do it all over again. This particular tube might have 10 bees in it, 10 eggs. So not a lot. There's not a lot of bee numbers in here. It's not a honeybee hive that has 10,000 bees in it. But that's basically what they do. So if you cut this particular stem back and you compost it or you throw it to the landfill, you're also throwing all the cute little bees away along with it. So don't do that. You can try to cut things back. So this is a figure or a diagram, because people are still trying to figure out, well, you can't just leave them up forever, right? You can't just leave dead things up. And so the idea is to do this multiple year process. So in the winter, you just first winter, you leave everything as is. The next spring, the bees come in and they lay their eggs in those stems. They've kind of broken off Naturally, that summer, usually the new growth from that plant covers up the stems, so you're not looking at just a bunch of dead sticks in your yard, you're looking at beautiful flowers. This is coneflower in this example. And then, fall, winter, it dies back, and then those stems from the previous year, typically at that point the bees have emerged, they kind of have broken down, they decompose, and then you have that year's stems. And then the cycle repeats. So you're always having some stems that are in good shape for the insects to use, and then some that are older that are falling down on their own. But the important thing is that you're not coming in, cutting them to the ground, taking those stems, and throwing them away. And who wouldn't want to have adorable little bee faces sticking out of sticks? Or even better than bee faces or bee butts. The bottom right picture there, bee butts are really cute when they stick their head in flowers or in stems or going into nests. So they're just adorable. So to mention bee hotels, because this is something people are starting to use, couple of caveats on them. They're fine, certainly something you can use. They are only for cavity nesters, so that's about 30% of native bees in general, so it's not doing anything for the ground nesting bees. The hole size also matters, so this one in the picture, the one that you can just buy from the store, there are no bees the size of those big holes, so that's one that's just like, oh, look at all the different sizes, it's so pretty, but that's not going to do anything for bees. It's also pretty shallow. They need to be about 6 to 8 inches long. And you need to be able to clean or replace the tubes every year. So this is a bee hotel that has cardboard tubes that are about the size of a straw, sort of a thick, like a chocolate shake straw. And you can see bees crawling in and out. And then you can take those and replace them and sort of clean the box around it. And you're basically not allowing for bacteria and fungus and things like that to build up in the bee hotel. So if you go and just drill holes in a block of wood, that's cool and that's great. But if you just leave it and don't do anything else with it, that block of wood is typically going to stay there longer. And that's when you start getting the numbers building up. So how do you switch these out? So the thought, I will say I failed with this last year. I tried doing an emergence box, nothing worked. But the idea is that you take your bee hotel like this and you take all the tubes out and then you put them in a box that has a single hole in it. When the bees emerge, they go to the light, they go out of the hole, but they typically are not going to go back into that same size hole. They're looking for something like a twig or something like that to nest in. And so they all basically emerge, they crawl out of the hole, they fly away, they do their bee life, and they don't come back in. And then you go in, you pull out your box, you pull out your tubes, you throw your tubes away, you clean your box, you do whatever type of box you have to clean it up, and then you start over with fresh stuff. So you take basically that winter's bees, put them in this box, put out clean materials for next year's bees, and then you just keep sort of swapping those through. Like I said, didn't work for me. I opened up my box and it was full of dead bees. I felt horrible. They didn't make it out of the hole. I'm gonna try again. Remember how insect numbers can go up and down a lot? I did the down, so now I'm trying to get them to do the up. But this is what allows us to at least be able to clean them out. Other things need places to shelter. On windy days, butterflies like to hang out in grasses, maybe a rock crevice, something like that. So again, allowing those grasses to stay up. Don't just cut them down in the fall. They also like a variety of things, so having shrubs, trees, grasses, all of that really helps for providing places for butterflies to hang out and other insects. Places to hibernate, so this is getting into our winter season. Most bees and butterflies will go through some sort of diapause, which is basically a hibernation. And it can be different parts of the life cycle. Some of them, it's as an egg, and so they lay an egg in the previous year, it overwinters as an egg, and then it goes through the rest of the life cycle the next year. Sometimes it's a larvae, sometimes it's a pupa, sometimes it's an adult, sort of depends on the season. But at some point, they go away, but these aren't migratory insects, so they have to be around somehow, and the way they're around is typically in this diaposing form. And the place that they tend to be is in your leaf litter. So this is something that people have started talking about a little bit more recently, I would say, which is this idea of a soft landing. So if you have an oak tree, which we mentioned is great for caterpillars and things like that, and they normally would form a pupa and drop to the ground and overwinter there. If you have nothing but lawn or pavement or something like that, those cocoons drop to the ground, those pupae drop to the ground, and they die because they don't have a habitat for it. And so this idea of a soft landing is to turn the area sort of below the tree or below the shrub into something other than pavement or other than lawn. So when they drop out, it's more like being in nature, which would be leaves and things like that under a tree. So this is kind of what it could look like. And I would say the nice thing about this is probably what a lot of our yards look like. So there are probably cases where you have a tree in the driveway, or something where it doesn't really have a soft landing, but I think a lot of yards do kind of look like this, where there is habitat, there is a place for the caterpillars and the pupae to land and overwinter. You may have seen something like this, leave the leaves. This is the sort of catchphrase that's coming out with a lot of this. Leaves are not litter, they're not trash, they don't explode, they don't cause crime, they just are leaves. And normally leaves decompose and contribute back to the soil. They're this sort of insulating area for the caterpillars to hang out in. When you take all your leaves and you rake them up and you put them in a bag and they go to the landfill, all of that life that could be in there is disposed of. Your soil doesn't improve. It's bad conditions. Again, this is not black and white. If it's your pavement, by all means rake them up. If you have a ton of leaves, having a foot-thick layer of leaves on your lawn can smother it. It's a way to get rid of your lawn, which I also would encourage, but you may not want to do that. And so you can move your leaves around, but typically try to keep them in your yard, put them in a flower bed, put them in a corner. You can, like if the ones that fall on your lawn or that fall on the sidewalk, that can be your compost for the next year. But try to use those leaves because it's a good for wildlife, good for the environment. Birds also need shelter, so branches and foliage to protect them, nesting sites. Nesting sites are interesting. They can be on the ground. Some birds are ground nesters. Some are in trees. Some are in cavities. I know it seems like barn swallows really like to make their nest directly over front doors so that they poop on you every time you're coming in and out. But those are sort of the ledges, the cavities. So having this type of diversity in the landscape, again, trees and shrubs provide a lot of cover. And again, allowing, some nice things that are essentially cover plants. So shrubs that maybe don't flower, maybe they don't do as much, like maybe they're spiny, maybe you actually let spiny plants into your yard in the right location, not right next to your door, of course, but someplace where, the birds are protected from the neighborhood cats, for example. Okay, and so the last thing that you're doing for the wildlife, you've provided food, you've provided a place for them to shelter. The last thing you want to do is to go out and spray them with a chemical. So this is the idea of a safe environment. So insecticides kill insects, herbicides kill plants, aka insect food, which doesn't mean you just have to throw your hands up and let everything go to hell. You can go through integrated pest management practices, which kind of works its way sort of on this pyramid from less toxic to more toxic. It's the arrow in there. And also from a prevention to an intervention. And so the bottom piece there is a cultural effect. And that basically means good sanitation. So this is from pests of animals, but good sanitation for gardeners might mean you clean your pruners before you go from one plant to another. It might mean that you're putting the right plant in the right place. So if you have a plant that's always struggling because it needs more water or it's too sunny or it's not sunny enough, those stressed out plants are going to be more susceptible to pests and disease. And so you're already starting kind of at a bad state. And then you can go physical, mechanical, so row covers, picking stuff off. I know a lot of people will go out, to their tomato veggie garden, a cup of coffee and a cup of soapy water, and you put the caterpillars that you don't want in the soapy water. You're not spraying anything, you're just targeting the particular things you don't like, the insects you don't like. Biological control, the one people always think of are ladybugs, so ladybugs, lacewings, things like that. What we really encourage at this point is providing that all the stuff we talked about, native plants, all those that bring in beneficials like parasitic wasps. Is that the right? Anyway, wasps that lay their eggs on caterpillars. Parasitoids and parasites, things like that. Predators, letting the spiders around, letting the praying mantis do their thing. And then you can go to conventional. So again, or to chemicals. And the idea with IPM isn't that you never touch a chemical spray again. It's that that's sort of your last option. And you go with less toxic chemical sprays, maybe a neem oil or an insecticidal soap. And then finally, if it's something that's really bad, you can start looking for some of the more conventional chemicals. The big take home from all of this is that you see a bug, don't just spray. That's the thing we're trying to move away from. Figure out what the bug is. Is it something that you actually want? Is it something you can take care of in a different way before you come in with the big guns? This is theoretically true. A functioning and diverse ecosystem tends to have fewer problems because the idea is that if a pest population, if an aphid population starts to explode on your milkweed, the parasitic wasps are going to come in and kill the aphids. They'll lay their eggs in the aphids. The problem sort of goes away. The challenge with this is that you have to have enough of an ecosystem to provide those beneficials to begin with. And a lot of us live in pretty decimated ecosystems in cities, right? There isn't necessarily that pool of insects and beneficials that can come in and take care of the problems. So we're all going to take effort and start doing our pieces in our own yard, but we do have to probably intervene more now than we will hopefully in 5-10 years as everybody's yard starts to get more diversity and more beneficial insects present. So to put all this together, consider your whole yard as an ecosystem. Provide for your pollinators at all stages, flower beds with a variety of shapes, colors, bloom patterns, bloom season. Provide that place for them to overwinter and to nest in by leaving some areas messy, again, at least as much as you can. Leaving some bare ground, get rid of your weed cloth, never put weed cloth down if you can help it. Black plastic, all that stuff. Get rid of it, and then practice integrated pest management. And the best part of all of this is that then you get to be like me and stand in your front yard with a camera and have all your neighbors wonder what the heck is wrong with you because you're looking at the butterflies and the bees and the caterpillars and the birds flying over and just really enjoying sort of the nature that you've brought in. All of these pictures are either from my house or from the Chihuahuan Desert Gardens, at least on this screen. All right, I said there wasn't going to be much in the way of a plant list, but there are a few favorite plants is what we'll call them. And so this just is try to convince you that there's bugs. I know what I'm talking about. There's bugs on plants. So it's not really favorite plants. It's a very small percentage of my favorite plants. So with trees, some of the good options, desert willows, which I think a lot of people are familiar with, they bloom through that's the middle picture here, from basically summer through fall. They kind of have peaks that come and go with the rain. But the picture, the red bud, that's the picture on the left, that's our early spring bloomer. So if thinking about seasons, red buds are really important. We have early season bees like Osmia, the blue mason bee. They are spring emergers. They're only around for a couple months. And so by May, those bees are gone. They're eggs, their pupa, their larvae, but the adults are gone. And so they need food, and red buds are a good source of that food. Oaks are beautiful. They do really well. This is a Chisos red oak in the garden. Red oaks have beautiful fall color, which we don't have a lot of necessarily, but they're a great one to add. And they support a lot of insects. Some of the shrubs, the rain sages, they're flowering again, right? It's amazing. We've had a good summer with our monsoon season. We've had good rains, and they're the plant that gets covered in lavender, purple flowers after a rain. And lots of bees enjoy them. They smell great. They're pretty. Flame acanthus is that hummingbird bush that I mentioned in the middle picture. And then the one on the right is woolly butterfly bush. It's a really drought-tolerant plant native to the Chihuahuan Desert, has these cool orange pom-pom flowers. I see on this a lot of sand wasps and syrphid flies, which are pollinators, and their larvae are beneficials. They eat nasty insects, so good shrubs to add. On more of the really drought-tolerant succulent side, Hesperaloe, which is the picture on the left. Beautiful flowers throughout most of the summer. Hummingbirds love them. Other bees will visit them. The picture in the middle with the white flower is a soap tree yucca. Not a very long bloom period. They bloom sort of late spring, early summer, but they're really important for yucca moths and nocturnal pollinators. And then agaves are not something you would plant for pollinators because how often do they flower? Once. It takes them a long time. They flower once and then they die. So it's not something that you would think necessarily is like great for my insect pollinators. But if you like bats, a lot of bats require agaves to flower. I was driving around town before I got here doing some errands and saw some big agave americana on Telshore, is that Telshore? That were flowering with like the big giant flower stalks. So they don't do it often, and you're always sad because it means your plant's going to die, but they are impressive, impressive flowers. I mentioned grasses. I love grasses. I wish more people loved grasses, and not just to cut into balls, which I saw around town a lot. Here, El Paso as well. Here we have blue grama grass on the top left, muley grass, which I actually saw planted out here by the street, and then little blue stem that has these really pretty red flowers. They have a bluish stem during the summer, and then as they start to go dormant, they get that lovely red color. And you can see all the seeds that attract all the birds, on all the plants actually. Some other flowers, Blackfoot daisies, very drought tolerant, attract a lot of bugs. Find them growing in the Oregon Mountains and the Franklin Mountains. Rock penstemon. Penstemons of all sorts are wonderful. Hummingbird plants. Rock penstemon is our summer flowering penstemon, long flowering season. Autumn sage. I love autumn sage. 7 of you will also love autumn sage because you're going to get a free one on the way out as part of the drawing. But they're, again, hummingbirds love them. You see a lot of insects on them. And of course, cacti, you can't ignore cacti. They typically don't have long bloom periods. A lot of the cacti, so barrel cactus at the top is a summer bloomer. Prickly pears are mostly summer bloomers. The one on the bottom right is a long mama nipple cactus. I'm not going to go into that, but it's an understory cactus, flowers with the rain, these big, 2-inch across magenta flowers. And there's lots of different options. And there's bees that are specialists on cactus flowers. So you won't be able to support those bees if you don't have some cactus around. Just some fun pictures. This is a Blackfoot daisy with a, blanking on the name of the bee, but a very, very small yellow bee, native bee. Perdita, that's the name. And again, if you saw this, would you think, oh, look at that bee? Like, they're so diverse. They have such a cool diversity of sizes and shapes. Queen butterflies on the Greg's mist flower. Like I said, if you don't have Greg's mist flower in your yard, find a space for it. That's your homework over the winter. Go to the nurseries. It's pretty available. Come to the plant sale at UTEP and get you some mist flower. Greg's, G-R. This plant? Yeah, so the question was, how do you spell it? It's Greg, like G-R-E-G-G, and then mist flower. M-I-S-T flower. I assume you didn't want Conoclinium gregii as that wasn't what you were asking for. There's another Blackfoot daisy with another tiny bee on it. I really like tiny bees. This is Greg's mist flower again with a leafcutter bee. It has its hair, so you think about most bees have pollen on their legs. Leafcutter bees have them on their abdomen, on their tummy. And so this bee's down, I don't quite know why it's got its abdomen curled up so much, like it doesn't want to get the pollen knocked off of it maybe. But foraging in that Greg's mist flower being adorable. Sometimes you get multiple bees. This is an Indian mallow. Mallows in general are good. We have globe mallow is a really great native plant. And 2 different species of bees in this one. And all these were in my front yard last year, and all of them were on the same day. So just to give a sense that, if you look carefully and plant some good diversity, you can really attract a lot of good diversity in your yard. And I just live in a generic, El Paso neighborhood. So just your reminders, things not to do: put your shears down, put your rake away, don't take all the leaves, clean up where you need to, but leave as much as you can. Don't cut your perennials and your grasses to the ground. Most of the time we talk about cutting stuff back anyway for the health of the plant is in early spring. So for the most part, you want to leave all your plants as is. Through the winter, the above ground growth, not only is it helping wildlife, it's also protecting the heart of the plant or the roots of the plant, so that above ground growth helps with that. Things you can do: go dig some holes, put some plants in the ground, and then really start figuring out what are you going to be doing when spring rolls around, other than getting a nice camera and cups of coffee. Some good resources. These are excellent to use. The Xerxes Society is the premier nonprofit focused on insect conservation. So they have plant lists. There's a representative who lives in, I'm going to say, Santa Fe or Albuquerque, who works for Xerxes. I know she's done talks down here for the Native Plant Society, Las Cruces chapter. So great stuff with pollinators in general. Monarch Watch, you can guess what they focus on. Ladybird Johnson Wildflower Center has a great resource of almost all native plants in North America. They don't have everything, but they've got a lot. Pollinator Partnership, obviously, is a pollinator group. If you want to figure out what your bugs are, iNaturalist is a great resource. If you're not familiar with it, it's a free website and app. You take pictures of stuff. It has a computer vision model that identifies it as best it can, but then other people can look at your observations, help identify them, and so on. So check it out by all means. I think I mentioned it's free. And you can contact me. Are we doing drawing after this, after questions? Okay. So this is my contact info, and at this point, I'd be happy to take any questions. And then after questions, we'll do a drawing for some of the plants that I brought. And it looks like if you're in the house, Molly will bring you a microphone so people online can hear.
Yeah, I went to a lecture of yours last year, and you talked about the problem with agaves and the boll weevil. Now, in my front yard, I had a wonderful agave, and it had grown a lot. It was like 4 feet, and it had a bunch of pups. And then recently I noticed the outer leaves drooping, and then the center seemed to be drooping, and pulled it out, and there were the boll weevils and so there's 2 pups that have survived, and I went and got a neonicotinoid, and poured it about a foot away from the surviving. I feel bad using that, but what's your opinion?
So we do the same thing. So agave weevil is a naturally occurring weevil, but it attacks it. The female burrows into the heart of the agave, lays its eggs, and then the hole allows for bacteria and fungus to get in, plus the life cycle of the weevil. They basically eat the heart of the plant and cause it to rot, which is why the leaves fall sort of from the outer edge down. This is, and so again, on IPM, right, as you go up your triangle, you're at the top of the triangle at that point. And so the only thing that I know of to protect the plants is to use a systemic insecticide like imidacloprid or a neonicotinoid. And that's what we do at the gardens. We protect our plants with that. And I also feel guilty about it because the way that those work is they take the chemical up into the plant, and then all of the tissue basically becomes toxic, including the pollen and including the nectar. And so it's been tied to a lot of pollinator die-off if it's just used sort of all over the place. So we only use it on agaves, and the reason that we feel good about using them on agaves is they only, like we said, they flower once, right? And so you can protect that adult plant, and you're not really affecting other members of the ecosystem. So that's what we do with ours. What we try to do, because we do a soil drench, if there's other plant roots that are next to there, they'll also pick that chemical up. So if you do have, like desert marigolds or other flowers near there, you want to pull those before you treat, because those will also pick up that insecticide and then become toxic as well. So we try to create, we call it like our Noah's Ark of agaves. So we just have agaves, we try to get rid of the other stuff so that we can treat just agaves and not affect other parts of the ecosystem. So like I said, it's not as black and white, right? You have to protect the plants. The challenge that I don't know how to answer, because this is also happening, is they will affect Hesperaloe, the false red yuccas. And those flower all the time. Those flower the entire summer. So we lost our first one of those to weevils this year in the garden. We took it out. We treated the agaves that were around it, but we're not going to treat those plants because we won't treat the Hesperaloe, because then the pollen becomes toxic, and then that's more into the ecosystem. We don't know what we're going to do. I don't know that there's a good solution for that yet. I will say one of the things we're contemplating, because the weevils don't have wings, they have to crawl. And so we're thinking maybe those really nice pots that have a glaze to it, maybe it'll be slippery enough that they can't get their little weevil legs going up it. And we could plant the Hesperaloe, the red yuccas, in pots that have essentially a slippery surface. And maybe that'll be enough to protect them without, and again, if you think about that IPM triangle, that's more of that like cultural, mechanical piece. But I always hate the weevil discussion because there's no good news that comes out of it. But be aware, that's the other thing, like I still think agaves are worth planting, but look for that sign of decline. It's really pretty characteristic. The center stays up, the leaves around it fall down, you grab the center and it wiggles around. It's gone, you can't bring it back. You just have to say its last rites, and then you dig it up and you put it in a bag and you throw it away, because what's in there are all of the babies, and you don't want them to get into other parts of the yard or the neighborhood.
I see many bees visit the Texas sage that I have in my yard. Do they produce any seed?
The Texas sage? The Texas sages do. They are very small. So I don't know that I've been looking for the seeds, but if you look on the flower stalk where the flower is, there will be a little like cone-shaped structure, and that's the fruit, and then it'll dry out and it opens, and the seeds are tiny. And so what I've read is that the seeds basically blow away before you're able to see them. So what we've done, or what I actually have going on right now, is getting some mesh bags, and you tie a mesh bag around it. Something, I forget what they're called, it's like jewelry bag or something like that if you search for it, but it's really fine mesh, and then you tie it around the fruit before it's ripened or around the branch, and that way when it opens, all of the seeds are collected in that bag and they don't just blow away. But they do produce seed, you should be able to collect it, but it's, you need to do something to save it before they blow away.
I see any small Texas sage in the ground.
So the question was, if there are seeds, why don't you see more seedlings coming up in the yard? So I don't know. It could be that the conditions aren't right for the seeds to germinate. Maybe it gets too dry. We do have seedlings of the Texas sage come up in the garden. So I know it's possible, but I will say, I mean, we've got 30 to 40 plants, and we see 8 seedlings a year. So, and they flower a bunch. So it seems like the seeds don't put up a lot of volunteers. They're not an easy seeded plant. So you might get lucky and see some, especially if you have 2 plants and you know that there's bees happening, like that pollination is occurring, then it's probably just the conditions for the seeds just aren't right for them to grow.
Two questions. We have a area of our yard that has a lot of pines, Mondale or Afghan or whatever. Are the pine needles good habitat for insects? Should we leave them there?
I think so. I mean, they're good insulation. They don't break down the same way that like a broadleaf would. So they're better than nothing, but yeah.
And it's all bare ground under them. I mean, so the second question, the second part of that is, can I take the deciduous leaves and put them in that area rather than leave them on the lawn?
Sure. Yeah, so most of the recommendation is leave the leaves where they fall, but if it's someplace where, you know, it's on a lawn or something like that, you can rake them into a bed and then let everything happen into that bed. I don't know, because our neighbors have pine trees, so we have a lot of pine needles as well. We will go through and sort of get the excess, whatever you consider excess, and sort of usually throw those away because they don't compost very well. If you're a good composter, maybe you could make it work, but I'm not. And so we'll sort of throw away the excess, but leave the majority of, I don't even know if it's the majority, leave some, remove the ones that seem like extra. Where if it really seems like it's suffocating plants or it becomes so thick and it doesn't break down, then like removing them can be good.
It's all bare ground underneath the,
Yeah.
There's probably 10 trees that are 30 to 40 foot high.
Yeah, and so they're probably out competing anything that could potentially grow underneath them. So it probably doesn't hurt to leave.
Now, lots of
stuff
birds
there.
in them, lots of
Yeah,
doves,
yeah.
but that's for nesting. So.
Yeah, that's our neighbors' pine trees. We have a lot of great birds because our neighbors have pine trees, and so a lot of birds they come to our yard for food, and then they fly into the neighbors' pine trees for shelter. Yeah.
Any other questions?
In terms of leaving them or letting them, so the question was,
pine cones, yeah.
Yeah, what do you do about pine cones? Other than throw them at the neighbor you don't like, or make them into bird feeders, they're slow to break down. So if they're excess, then by all means you can get rid of them. But if they're not hurting anything, then you can leave them, and something will eat it eventually. Like, they do break down slowly. They're just not a very quick breakdown. Pines aren't native to our area, and so a lot of the things that would happen, native to the Mesilla Valley, right? They're native if you go up into the mountains. But it's so don't have the same insects, don't have the same critters that would actually work to break down some of the pine needles more and the pine cones. You can give them to school groups and they can make pine cone bird feeders out of them. I've collected a lot of pine cones to do that, but yeah.
When is the UTEP native plant sale, please?
When?
Yes.
So our next one, it looks like April 11th is the date in 2026. We do twice a year, so we do a spring and a fall. Spring, we're aiming for the beginning of April and just have to work around Easter weekend. So it looks like the 11th is going to be this upcoming one. The fall sale, we just had it 3 weeks ago. And the fall sale, we have to work around the UTEP football schedule. Not that they're any good. The plant sale is way better than the football team, so we're not recording this, right? But no, so we work around that, but we usually try to get something in like late September, early October for a fall sale, and then early April for the spring sale. And you can go, sorry? So we advertise the plant sale on our website. So if you go, it's utep.edu/museum will take you there. We also advertise on our social media. If you're a Facebook or Instagram user, follow us. We do, if you're not a member of the Las Cruces chapter of the Native Plant Society, consider joining. I think they try to spread the word. Jeff Anderson, the extension agent, always knows about it. He's one of our good volunteers. So we try to spread the word. But yeah, checking, sort of knowing that general time and then looking on our website. We usually try to get the date published a couple months ahead of the sale.
One other question you may or may not have an answer. We have a redbud in our yard, but it's been dropping all the leaves. It's lost tons of them. Is that a disease or lack of water? Or?
Short answer is I don't know. I know some of the ones we have at the gardens are also starting to turn pretty brown and drop leaves.
This is all year.
All year?
Yeah.
Do you know what subspecies of redbud it is?
I don't.
Yeah,
We got it at one of the local nurseries.
Yeah, so Eastern redbud is the overarching piece, but there's a Texas subspecies or variety and then a Mexican, which are a little more drought tolerant. It's hard to say. The Mexican has smaller leaves that are thicker, and so it's more drought tolerant. If they're big leaves that are kind of not, it could be that it's the Eastern species and wants more water, so you could try that as an approach. Talk to master gardeners, talk to Jeff, and have him figure it out for you. Yeah.
Any other questions? Do we have any online? So sorry.
Oh, I've got a lot of questions. No, near our house, in between a couple of driveways, there's a strip about 8 foot wide, and I've been putting various cactus in there, and, don't water it. But this year, because of the water, there were a lot of pigweed. And so I was thinking, these are invasive. I was pulling them out. And then a friend who knows something said, no, these are native. And should I leave those for the seeds for the wildlife?
So, I mean, the short answer is yes, because I see lots of birds eating seeds off of them. They also are a pretty aggressive spreader, and they could block out your cactus. So I think pulling them is also fine. I wouldn't feel guilty about pulling them. We pull stuff like that at the garden all the time. We are in charge of our yards, right? So we get to decide what plants we want and what we don't. We want to, again, work towards letting things stay, letting them grow, leaving the natives there. But if code compliance comes along and gives you a citation, right? If it just looks bad and you don't want it because it looks bad, those are all perfectly acceptable things that you can do in your yard and not feel, I wouldn't lose any sleep about it. Because a lot of these things that are sort of weedy will take over if you let them seed and spread, especially with good rain like we had this year.
You showed some grasses. Are there some insects or bees visit grasses?
So they don't visit for food, but they'll visit as a shelter. So they'll sort of perch on it if it's near a flower. But the grasses are not so much for bees as much as they are for some of the other wildlife. And some bees, actually, like bumblebees, will often nest in the leaf litter below the grasses, or the sort of grass duff under there. So they can be important parts for the ecosystem in general, but not like a flower providing a direct source of food for a bee. But I'm, by all means, plant grasses and love them.
One more quick question. After the hard freeze, should we leave our lantana or cut it back?
So usually we leave them up until spring. So if it's, because they can get really big, right? So if there's a hard freeze and they die back and you need to get it off your walkway or something, feel free to do that. But the typical hard cut back, we wait until late winter, early spring to do that.
That's okay, because it came back great. I cut it back last year and it came back.
Yeah, and usually
amazing.
you can cut it back sooner and it usually isn't a problem. Sometimes if we get another hard freeze and you've cut it back, then it could potentially, it's not as insulated by all the dead limbs and stuff like that. But
Yeah, I waited until it was late winter. I think it was late February when I cut it back.
That's usually, that's the recommendation, is almost always wait until February-ish to do things. Yeah.
Anybody else? Questions for Dr. Floyd? Any online questions?